My friends, welcome to another episode of Diner Talks with James. I'm James, and I am pumped to be here with you all today. Thanks for hanging out with me in the diner. What do you have today? You want some Eggs Benedict? You probably do, you fancy prick. It's fine. We'll make it for you. But we are excited that you are here, my friends, in the diner. Squeeze into the booth and hang out with me. I got to be in the South recently. I got to go to Waffle House. It brought me back, y'all. There's just something about that all-star special egg scrambled with cheese. Give me that waffle coated in butter and syrup. Give me that white toast. Give me them grits. I'm telling you, y'all, I just love it. Late night diner conversations are my jam, and that's why I love spending time with you. My friends stepping in to the booth with me, sliding into the booth, I should say, but he is standing technically. But is my boy, Mike Ganino. He is an incredible man, a man that I have admired from afar for a number of years. We've followed each other on Instagram for quite some time. We've shot a like or a quick comment back and forth every once in a while. Definitely has the best hair in the biz, but he's someone who I've admired. He is a brand strategist. He is a storytelling coach. He is a fellow improviser, a professional speaker. He is an incredible man. He wrote a great book. He's been featured in all these sorts of publications. He is all over the damn place. He's also been known to run TEDx Cambridge from time to time. Casual, the oldest and longest running TEDx in the country, maybe in the world, probably in the world. But either way, I'm super pumped that he is joining us from LA. Great town, great man. Let's have a great conversation. Bringing out my friend right now, Mike Ganino.
I was so triggered, by the way, of thinking back. You mentioned, Eggs Benedict and being in the South, and I had this memory. I used to work in this very high-end restaurant in North Carolina in Greensboro called Green Valley Grill, and I hated working the brunch. I love working at night. I hated brunch because you had to work so freaking hard for brunch. You're running around, the check averages are low, and you go home totally sweating, totally having run around the restaurant, and you made $40 serving fancy people Eggs Benedict and sweet tea. And I just had such a triggered moment when you said that at the top of the show, by the way.
I try to piss my guests off early.
You knew. You got right. It was like Inception. You were in my brain, ready to say, what can I do to make this guy have very painful flashbacks?
Bringing up that hollandaise. All right.
Oh, gosh.
I love it. That's amazing. How long were you a server for?
I mean, a lot. So all through high school, I worked at Pizza Hut. And Pizza, by the way, this was back when Pizza Hut had the actual hut roofs, and you went in and it was dark and ambianced, and we had a buffet and a salad bar. And so I worked as a server all through high school. And the little town I'm from, the Pizza Hut is the nicest restaurant in town. So it's where people go to celebrate things. During prom, we would set the party room up with little fake candles, those little fake votives that just wiggle in the wind. We would set those up and have prom dinners at Pizza Hut. It was very, very sexy. And then I continued that in college, and then after college, and in 2000, when I was 20, I became a flight attendant. And I stopped officially waiting tables then, but then stayed in the restaurant industry for 14 more years in some capacity.
Yeah. First off, we're 30 seconds into this podcast. I've already heard 2 stories. So way to live up to your brand. Second, where was the small town that you grew up in?
I grew up all over the place, but I went to high school in a town called Parker, Arizona, which is right on the border of California and Arizona. So 3 hours from Vegas, 3 hours from Phoenix, 3 hours from Palm Springs, out in the middle of nowhere in the desert.
But actually,
yeah, super far. And so, and right on the Colorado River. So we actually lived on the California side, but there's nothing in the California side except for a post office and a bar. And on the other side, in the Arizona side, we'd cross a bridge. So I went to school in Arizona. So California paid Arizona for me to go to school there because there was no school on the California side. And so yeah. And my mom and my grandma still live there. My mom works at the school district still.
Outrageous. So when you fly in, do you fly into Palm Springs and drive a couple hours? Where do you fly to?
Well, I drive because I live in LA. So
touche. That's
it's
right.
6-hour drive from here. Usually what we do is we go and we stay the night in Palm Springs. So we drive 2 or 3 hours to Palm Springs, stay the night, and then do the rest of the trip. But if you were flying in, you would fly to Vegas or Phoenix and then drive. Palm
Love it.
Springs is a bougie airport. It's expensive to fly to Palm Springs. So Vegas or Phoenix, you can usually get like the, cheaper deals and
Those cheaper flights. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. As a speaker who does a lot of work in the college market, I've been to a lot of random towns, right? I was just in Pikeville, Kentucky, flying to Cincinnati and drive 3 hours into the mountains of Kentucky. And so like there's part of me that's like, I'm surprised I haven't heard of this town because I've landed and have driven 3 hours to nowhere, Shadron, Nebraska, Carbondale, Illinois. And so one day we'll get out to park.
There is a community college called Arizona Western College. So who knows, maybe the 42 students there someday, they deserve to hear from you. I believe
it. I believe. Yeah, I'm sure most of them listen to this random podcast too. So we're going to book this gig.
I like it. Let's. I'll be like your. I'll introduce you or something. I want to be there for this.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I got a guy.
You have an entourage. You bring your own intro, your speaker intro.
Exactly. Yeah, we're gonna get there. Those are goals. Mike, this show is called Diner Talks with James, and we've already started talking about restaurants, which makes me happy, but I'm a huge fan of late night eating because it's usually with great human beings, right? I don't just do it alone frequently, but if I do, we call those sad days. But anyway, but I'm wondering, do you have a late night guilty pleasure? I know you are newly a father, and so maybe we're not going out and going as hard, but do you have a late night guilty pleasure?
Like food wise?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess I'll take anything at this point. Now I'm curious about it all, but
it's like, what were you gonna say? Like, what was the other option here? I mean, we already were talking about milk and jizz, so it's gonna go downhill.
That's right. But, that wasn't on the air though, so now people are very fascinated.
Yeah, well, you have to stay for the after show. That's how we hook them, right? That's what you do. You get them to. I don't know how that works. What is my guilty pleasure for late night food? I think that if I was like in a diner, I don't know, I'm kind of boring. I would get like eggs and I would like want a lot of extra. So you know what really bothers? Let's talk about this.
Okay. Yeah.
What really bothers me is you go to the late night diner and you say like, hey, I'll have like some crispy bacon. Mm-hmm. And they give you 3 pieces of bacon. No, I want a platter full of bacon. I want like Mike is on the Carnival Cruise Line and the bacon bin just opened and I pick it up and I take the whole bin of bacon to the table. That's the amount of bacon I want. I don't want 2 pieces. I don't want 3 pieces. Mm-hmm. I don't want to have to order 74 sides. Like just bring me a platter of bacon. That's what I want.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Platter of bacon.
And I ain't sharing it.
No. Get your grubby hands off this bacon.
That should be a shirt.
Right, it's like, yeah, that should be. Yeah. We'll work on the branding here. But the idea that, you pay like $4 for a side of bacon and I'm paying $1.25 a strip over here. Doesn't make any damn sense.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's still often not crispy enough.
I know it's like, I want to just like be like, can I have permission to go in the kitchen and just fry this until it is ready? Because it needs to snap.
Yes. 100%.
What is your answer to that question?
My answer to that question. So being raised in the Northeast, I'm a giant diner individual. So I'll late night, I'll go pancakes from time to time. And I also love a good grilled cheese with ham on it.
Ooh.
Yep, for sure. And French fries with a little ranch to dip them in. I like
just, the grilled cheese. I forgot about that. There was this, back when I was doing improv in Chicago, we would be done at like 1 and 2 in the morning, putting on the greatest theater for drunk people at midnight.
Yeah.
And we would go to this place called the Pick Me Up Cafe. And it was I felt like I was I felt like I was not a cast member, but a character inside of Rent going to the Life Cafe because it was like that. It was like eclectic and it had like multiple levels. Like you would walk in and there were steps everywhere. And yeah. And it was like, today's playing hooky. And it was so fun. And what I always got there, they had this really good like multi-grain bread with like little seeds in it. And I got this grilled cheese with tomato and guess what? Bacon. So good.
Outrageous. Yes. I'm someone who does not always love tomato on a sandwich, but I can do it on a grilled cheese. I don't know what it is. Yeah.
Are diners connected to the Northeast? You said like, I'm from the Northeast, so I love diners. Is that a thing?
I believe it is, but I'm also ethnocentric. So
You're a great American.
as a New Yorker, I
Yeah.
firmly believe that is the epicenter, and everything else just spins around it. And but I do. I mean, yeah, I do believe that they are. I mean, like for example, like in the Midwest, like in Detroit, diners are called Conies because
Mhm.
they're named after Coney Island, where all these diners were, right? And so,
Hmm.
so I do believe it started out there. A lot of Greek immigrants and stuff like that kind of started them. But yeah,
Oh, the Greek diners. Yeah.
yep.
Okay.
So, but don't quote me on that, and I don't do a fact check like armchair experts. So we'll just assume I'm right and keep going.
I like it.
But yeah, that's awesome. And another famous spot as a fellow improviser in Chicago, the Salt and Pepper next to the old IO.
Yep.
Good diner that I've eaten at a few times.
Many times. So we would always avoid, after shows at IO, we would avoid Salt and Pepper because so many of the audience members would go there.
Mm.
I would eat there a lot, but we would avoid it after shows and go to Pick Me Up because it was always it's just like 3 more steps down the road there. Because it was also Pick Me Up was also the place where when all of this is probably why I went there. Actually, it had nothing to do with seeing audience members. When all of the gay bars would let out, that's where everyone would go. So it was this melange of I don't even know if that's the right word, but I like it.
It felt right.
This like melange of like drag queens and like drunk gay frat boys and performers. It was fun.
And improvisers just doing bits with everybody for days.
Yeah. The whole thing was just, and you could see the servers were always, it's like you try to be cute, and it's like, I'm serving grilled cheese sandwiches for $5. Like, don't be cute with me. Like, just drink your juice and shut up.
Let's go, honey.
Seriously.
Oh shoot, that's amazing. You mentioned that you were a flight attendant, so in a way your serving career continued. Just took a bit of a turn.
I'm offended. We were there for people's safety, James.
Oh yes, right. Yeah, sorry. I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry. So what drove you to be a flight attendant? How did that happen?
I was living, so I went to college. I dropped out of college for like a million reasons, but I left college after a year and a half.
Mhm.
And I went and lived, this is when I went and lived with my aunt in North Carolina, where I worked at the fancy restaurant. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to California / Arizona. I'm going to like work at Pizza Hut for the summer. And then I'm going to move to LA, and, I'll walk along Sunset Boulevard and someone will surely say, you should be a star, kid. That's not how it works, oddly, except in like porn. It does work that way for anyway. So I thought that's what was going to happen. And I came home and I didn't go back to, I didn't make any plan to move anywhere. Yeah. And I was like miserable. And I lived with my grandparents. My grandma was like, you are miserable. And my whole life, I was like always this like happy little guy, always optimistic, always looking at the positive. And I just was like negative and angry. And that wasn't me. And she was like, what is going on? You need to get out of here. Like, you can't stay in this town. You've got to leave. What do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know. I feel so lost. I want to be famous, and I don't know what you do to do that. Cause I wasn't even going to fake it to be like, I want to be an actor. No, yeah. I just wanted to be famous. I didn't care about being an actor. Yeah. I just wanted people to know me.
Whatever the vessel was.
Yeah. It was, I don't care what it is. And so she said, well, what interests you? And I was like, I want to see the world. I never went anywhere. And so it was like, okay, let's do this. So I started auditioning for cruise lines to sing in the shows, but I looked so young when I was like 19. I really looked like a little baby. And so I was like, well, and I couldn't dance. So like I couldn't play the leading man in these shows on cruise ships, and I couldn't dance. So I couldn't play all the other roles. So I wasn't getting, or maybe I just couldn't sing. I don't know. I wasn't getting the roles.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, if you want to see the world, like, what about being a flight attendant? I always thought that would be cool. I was like, sure, whatever. So I went to 2 interviews and I got both the jobs. And one was working for, it was called, I think Arizona West Airlines or something like that. And it was basically like, little commuter, Phoenix to LA, Phoenix to San Diego, that kind of thing. And the other was called American Trans Air. And they did all of these charter flights, and we're starting to do commercial, but it was to Hawaii, to, Shannon, Ireland, to Palermo, Italy. And I was like, that's what I want to do. So I took that job and got based in Chicago. And that's how I ended up in Chicago. And then I did that for a year. And then 9/11 happened and everybody got furloughed. And I was so low in the ranks. It's all, union. So I was the lowest seniority. So I didn't get the job back. So then I was like, I guess I'll go back to serving people food.
So this is my sign.
yeah. A huge cataclysmic thing happened to tell me, head back to the kitchen, kid.
Yeah. Were you able to see some really incredible times or places, I should say, while you were flying with them?
Yeah. So it was interesting because forever the airline had been a charter airline. So they would fly people. They did like pleasant Hawaiian holidays, pleasant Mexican holidays. They did all these like charter flights to really cool places. They would, take people on groups of people to vacation destinations. And they had bought a bunch of new 737s to do commercial that they ended up selling later to Southwest when they went bankrupt. Mm-hmm. And so initially I was like, I'm going to go to Hawaii. And it's like, nope, you're going to Cleveland. And I was like, yay, Cleveland rocks. So I did some of that, but I did eventually get to go all these cool places. I went to Hawaii. I lived in Hawaii for like a month once. Awesome. Put up in there. I was so poor. Like you make like no money as a flight attendant really. Yeah. But I stayed in like a hotel, like right downtown Waikiki. And it was lovely and great. I went to Oman, Saudi Arabia. We did military charters as well. And so, and that was fun. If you know what I mean. So we did military.
Oh no.
You're stuck in a military base with a bunch of people. Yeah. And I went to Shannon, Ireland. That was another military charter, which was super fun. Mm-hmm. I went to, and usually the military charters weren't fast turns, meaning like we didn't go and have to come back right away. Yeah. So we had like a bunch of time there because it was cheaper to leave us there than to fly us back with an empty plane. Mm-hmm. Went to Italy, went to Guam. We went to Guam once. So yeah, pretty cool. And then I was a Spanish speaker. I was one of the Spanish speakers on the flights. So I went to San Juan, Puerto Rico a ton because that was like one of our kind of date. We were kind of like a value airline that didn't sell itself as a value airline. Okay. And so we would do these turns wherever people had like family that they would visit a lot from Chicago. And so San Juan, there's a huge Puerto Rican population in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And so we had flights to San Juan and Puerto Rico like 3 times a day for that reason. And also, vacation too, but it was a lot of people visiting family, coming back and forth. So I did that route for a really long time as well.
What a cool opportunity to see a little bit of the world. And also, a lot of times flight attendants, you only get maybe a day on the ground or just a long night or something like that, right? Because the turn is happening a lot quicker on many of the commercial airlines. And so the fact that were able to sit in Shannon for a while, sit in Oman for a while, and some of these other places, Hawaii for a month, casual, is that's awesome.
It was so fun. And I was in Hawaii with my roommate in Chicago. We were both there for not the whole time together, but a couple of weeks. And we didn't really have like money even to like go, like we couldn't really afford to like go get drinks or anything. We were and we're eating at the continental breakfast and then shoving croissants in our bag for lunch and maybe dinner. We took a little ham to make a fancy sandwich in our rooms. Sure. And so she started dating, and I had several female roommates in Chicago. So I'm not outing anybody here, who now probably is married with children, but, she started
name like, Rebecca. No,
dating one of the, how'd you know? No, I'm kidding. Started dating like a bartender. It's vacation dating. So the bartender knew that it wasn't going to last forever either. Yeah. And so we would get free drinks at like the Outrigger in Waikiki because we couldn't afford, it's expensive Waikiki and we didn't make a lot of money. So we dated for cocktails.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, people do that all the time.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. Work smarter, not harder, really, I think is what they say in the world. Now, it's funny because, you went to, you decided to do this to try to find yourself and do something that brought you life. Did it fulfill you? Did it fill the bucket? Were you like super sad when it kind of all ended? Or did you kind of see the writing on the wall?
There was a little bit towards the end where I was getting bored with it. Mm-hmm. Obviously there were more places that I wanted to see in the world, and I would have loved to have gone here and there and everywhere, but I was getting a little bit bored, and there's not really like an upward trajectory for flight attendants for the most part. You can become like the lead flight attendant, but I was often the lead flight attendant because nobody else wanted to do it, and I got stuck doing it. Basically means you like collect the money at the end because you're not anyone's manager. There's no managing of any of that. And so I was at the end, I really wanted more. I wanted to do something more. I was auditioning a bunch as well. And so I did a commercial that had like a buyout. And so I was like, I made $5,000 doing a class action. It was like class action, not class action. It was civil injury lawyer kind of thing. So I was like, I got smashed from my dad's car and my neck hurts. What am I supposed to do? And so I like played some college kid that did that. And I got like $5,000 for this buyout. And I was like, I don't need this stupid flight attendant job anymore. I'm rich and I'm going to get famous playing like local personal injury lawyer commercials. And so towards the end, I was a little disillusioned and I wanted more. I was only 20. I turned 21 that year of 9/11. And I was like, I wanted more. I wanted to do something more, and was kind of starting to get a little bored.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. We both had a similar dream of fame growing up, and I'm not going to tell you that I've lost it, but it's still around.
We're on the internet talking to each other and like putting it out for people. Clearly, there's something still there for us.
Yeah, for sure. I'm wondering, when did that, like, what was the trigger for you when you were younger that like, oh, this is what I really want to do? And you know, what was it? Something that you watched? Was it a celebrity where like, oh, I want to be like blank? Or like, what was it that kind of triggered that idea in your brain?
I don't know that there was any like person. I have deep feelings about some of the professions that we chase and where they come from, and like the inner healing and inner bonding we're doing with that. And so I don't know, did I enjoy performing? Did I enjoy, because even as a server, even as a waiter, and later on as a restaurateur, I understood the whole time that I was creating theater for people, that it was always theater, like restaurant dining is theater. And so there was something of it that was always a bit performative for me. Yeah. And I think, you know, it's like a chicken and an egg thing. It's like, did I pop out of the womb being like, hello, my baby? Like, I don't know if that was the case. Do we learn to be performative because of something we're taking care of or healing or trying to get attention or whatever the case is? So I don't know chicken or egg where it come from, but I do remember being really little and always recognizing that if you could do something engaging, that you could have people's attention. And that having people's attention and holding it was the most valuable thing in the world. I recognized that really early. Yeah. And, you know, I think I when I was a flight attendant doing my little announcements, did I add a little extra, you know, je ne sais quoi to the top? Of course I did. Yes, honey. And I did voices. I did it all. When I was a waiter, was it always performative? Absolutely. And so there was something where the through line of my life has always been that if you can create something engaging, relevant, that can hold people's attention, then you can have whatever you want in the world. And that's kind of probably the strongest through line I recognize. Where did that come from? I'm not sure. I haven't gotten that far in therapy yet.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll have you back on then. Well, I need you to unpack a little bit more of your life.
I haven't self-disclosed enough yet.
It's fascinating because I have a somewhat similar story in that I don't know if you know this about me. I have a Bachelor of Science in Marine Biology, and so in getting that degree, I didn't get that because I was excited to do research for the rest of my life. I got that because I watched Jacques Cousteau growing up, and I wanted to educate people about sufficiency to see. But if you're going to boil it down, like I wanted to be on television for that and doing exactly what Jacques Cousteau was like. This dude's old. Like, someone who's going to replace him, I'm coming up next, you know? And like, and so, but when you boiled it down, what I wanted to do was entertain people and make them think at the same time around a topic area that mattered a lot to me. than I thought should matter to them. And then you fast forward to where I am today, and that's what I'm doing now as a speaker, right? It's that underlying current that is there. And so I completely hear what you say. And I thought it was beautifully put.
And isn't it interesting? I think that more people, like a lot of the work I do with folks is around finding those moments. Cause I think like if you're going to be on stage, if you're going to be sharing something, it's finding the, like, what is yours to say, what is only you can say it, because that's the thing we should be on stages and on screens talking about, because everything else we can Google. And what I often find is that people have that same thing that I had and that you had when they really start to dig deep to say, actually, my whole life, I've kind of always, it's almost like an airplane when an airplane takes off and then it lands, and it's like the whole time it's just repositioning, because it's never on course. The airplane is always just course adjusting all the way till it lands. And it's almost like somehow, somewhere, someplace in our childhood, maybe there's a point that's set, a set point, and then we spend the rest of our lives adjusting back to it. And so for you, it's entertaining and performing. For me, it was entertaining and performing. And I find that most people, when we look at everything they've done, there's some kind of through line like that.
Yes.
And then we find interesting ways to do it. I mean, who would have thought? I didn't think this was an option, like to travel around and like people are going to pay me to talk to them on stage about like, the things that I talk about. I never would have thought that was an option for performing and doing the work that we do.
Yeah. My guidance counselor wasn't out here with this idea.
Nobody said like, so-and-so is going to pay you to come and teach their companies how to tell better stories. And you're like, what? I wouldn't have even known that was an option.
Yeah, exactly. All my stories right now end in I found $5. What are you talking about? So yeah. I'm wondering, was there something, digging back into childhood, I'm wondering if there was something that you used to do that your friends today would be like, of course you used to do that. Like that is so quintessentially you. But sometimes these are the moments that we forget about, but we're like, oh shoot, I used to really be just like that. Is there something like that for you?
Well, first of all, it would assume that I had friends growing up.
Okay, great.
I was like, I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. It was like a horrible thing to be like a little closeted gay baby in the world. But I think that probably like if I went back, and we moved so much, so I never really knew people more than like a year because we were always moving. High school, I went to the same high school for 3 years, and it was the first time in my life I'd ever gone to the same school for 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
And so I think if you went to all of those people, like preschool through, maybe not preschool, because I don't know if I could read then, but preschool through maybe even that year and a half of college, the one thing I think that everyone would say, like, of course, this dude makes words and then speaks them. If there was a chance to read something in class, I was going to take it, and I was going to make every other person in that class feel like an incompetent twit who couldn't speak and couldn't read because I delivered those lines, honey. Yes. So I think that's one thing that people would say is like, oh, of course, he says words emotionally relevant and says them in that way, because as I remember like going around the classroom and the teacher being like, we're going to read. And I was like, oh, give me 2 sentences. Don't give me 1 sentence. Give me 2. Let me show you what I can do. And I just loved that the whole time. Always. I always loved it.
Yes. Every time I read, I spirit read.
Yes. Yeah. There was never monotone. Never heard of her.
No. I'm going to put you right into Night with Eli Wiesel.
Got it. It's like, let's read the school newspaper. Okay. I mean, I wrote the school newspaper. I was editor, but let me read it to you. It was the greatest. If there had been podcasts back then, I would have had 7.
That's an incredible quote. That's awesome. I love those moments. Thinking back of like, oh, of course, that's how you were. I think I shared this maybe in another episode, but when I was younger, we had this the stump on the corner. We lived on a corner. We had this stump, and I would always ask my mom, "Can we go outside so I could wave at people as they go by?" And like, I just like, I piss extroversion, right? Like, it's to this day, that's, I want to be in a room full of strangers, just hamming it up.
Yeah.
And like, that is still what I, love to do, connecting with people, ask questions, learning about them, making them smile. Like that's, yeah. It's so, this is random things that we can go back to. And as we think about like, in my 30s, I'm lost. In my 40s, I'm lost. Or like what, going back to some, like you said, that, excuse me, that like waypoint that you described of like going back to it and just being like, what is something that brought me joy at a time where I didn't think about what brought me joy? It just did. And there's often a lot of gold for future opportunity in there.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because I think if someone is listening and they thought like, I remember my stump or whatever the situation is for them, the core driver of that, maybe not the stump, and maybe you didn't repeat the stump over and over.
Yeah.
But the core like driver of that, I bet, shows up again and again and again and again and again in someone's life, the same way it did for you and the same way it did for me. And there's something about that I think has to deal with like, why are you here? Like that's probably why you're here.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. 100%. 100%. Now you mentioned that you're gay. I don't know if you knew that, but you let that slip, just saying. But I'd be curious to hear when did you know that you were gay? Like when, like, was that, when did you, I guess, let's say, come out to yourself?
Yeah, it's so interesting with that. I was recently, I did like one of these like online summits, and we did like a post interview after my session went to like engage the group in a Facebook. And the person was also a theater person. She was, grew up theater in New York. She's like, oh my God, did you also grow up? Like I made some like Barbara Streisand comments. Like, were you guys like a Barbara Streisand house? And I was like, no, you know what? I was so scared to like Barbara Streisand, to like share that, because I felt like it would be an immediate, I was scared when I was because I grew up in Southern California, I was really scared to like go to Palm Springs ever. Like I was like there because it was like known as like a place where gay people were. I was scared when we lived in Sonoma County for a little while with my grandparents when I was a freshman. And I was so scared to like go into San Francisco because it was like, I know that I just was expecting that there would be like a line of gay people who were like, he's gay, like waiting for us as we cross the Golden Gate Bridge. And I was like, I know that they're going to look at me. And my husband and I were just talking about this of like being so scared to be seen by someone who was gay and them knowing the thing that you're unwilling to admit. So I was just, so this whole thing has come up recently. I was talking about it, and I don't remember. I remember always feeling different, but I also grew up in like a really small rural places. They exist in California, and always being performative, always wanting to write and sing. And I thought maybe it's not gay. Maybe it's just that I'm by a bunch of plebes and they don't know that, like, because it was like, we do that so often with like kids and high schoolers, where it's like, if you want to act and sing, that's a very gay thing to do. And it's like, but look at Hollywood. Like, it's obviously not. And so I remember really young being feeling different, because like all my friends were girls. I wanted to like put on little shows. I wanted to sing, and I wanted to dance, and I wanted to be creative, and I wanted to write. And early on, people would ask me, like, oh, are you a girl or a boy? Like when I was little, and they would call me girly. They would do that kind of thing. And that kind of bullying continued on through till college.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And I don't know, like I grew up with it being such not an option. Of not only did I never know my idea of like what it meant was that you were going to, growing up in the 80s, that you were going to get sick and have AIDS and die, because that's what we were seeing in the media. And then also being in small places where that was also like a disgusting thing to do, or that you were going to be some kind of like pedophile or something, because that's what I saw. That's what I was told all the time. And I just knew that I didn't want either of those things. So I think, I don't remember when I started to say like, I recognize that I might be, and I'm going to push it out. I don't know when that happened. I know that in high school, I have like a journal where I started to like talk about it a little bit. But then I was like, maybe it's just because I'm, like I'm a teenage boy and I just want it all the time. And so maybe it doesn't matter to me. And then I came out I had a girlfriend in my freshman year of college, like a more serious one. And then I broke up with her and had like my first boyfriend, my first experience with a guy, and then broke up with him and got back with her. And then I did that for several years. Because again, I just didn't see any role models of like what I didn't know anybody like me now who was like married and had a baby.
Yeah.
That didn't seem like an option to me. And that is why I've shared so often that visibility. And if you're in a place where you are safe, sharing your story really does matter, because someone is watching and can say, ooh, that just opened up an option for me that I didn't know existed.
Yeah. Yeah. Those moments that when going from feeling unseen to feeling seen.
Yeah.
Even if you don't exactly know that person, but just to know, right? Like as Black students walk through the halls of universities with rows of portraits of white men presidents, being like, is this what's happening here? Right.
Yep.
And just that, that power of relatability. When we see ourselves in someone else, we believe that we can.
Yeah.
And you hadn't been able, sound based on what you just shared, you really hadn't seen yourself in anybody else. You shared something powerful that is so different than I, as a straight person, would ever have to think about. Turns out that's what privilege is, not having to think about things. But anyway, let's move on. But still, the thing is that you were talking about was that, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about it if you'd be willing, but like that fear of being seen by another, by a out gay person, queer person, and them being like, you're one of us. Mm-hmm. You're clearly gay, little boy. Let's have a conversation. Like what was that fear? Like what, I guess, when I think of fears, I think of like, well, this is the worst that could happen. So if someone like if you went to Palm Springs and met a man, and it was like, oh yeah, okay, you're a little gay boy, or whatever it is, whatever the language is that you would prescribe there. What is the fear there?
For me, it was, I think at like the deepest level, the real fear is that you'll be sent out, that you'll be ostracized. And so this world that I grew up in was not one of and my mom and my dad and my grandparents are not like hateful people. They're lovely people, but like they were steeped in an environment that they'd never known anybody who was, I think I was the first person they ever knew who was gay when I came out to them. I don't think they ever knew anyone. And at the time when I did that 19, there wasn't even a lot of celebrities. So they didn't even know somebody like, oh, I really like that person and they're gay. And so there wasn't even that. So I think that the real fear, whether justified or not, I think this is what keeps people in the closet as well. There's the fear of like actual violence and that happened to people that are abused by family members for being gay. And so that's a real fear that people have. And I think the other big fear that keeps people in the closet is that you're going to be tossed aside, that you're going to be an out in the community. And this is the one thing I've talked about a lot with friends who will say something, will say like, well, I've posted before about like my journey with my mom, who's wonderful and great and such a part of my life, and with my husband and my daughter. But like, it was a journey too. And so I've posted that before, and people will message me privately and say, that's why with my kid, I make sure he knows that like, if he brings home a boy or a girl, it just doesn't matter, yada, yada. And I always say, that's not the point, because we are in an environment where it is assumed children, and you as well as a new dad with like me, I have to really think about I have to think, a gay man, I have to think not to say like, ooh, is this little guy going to be her boyfriend? Like, ooh, maybe they'll get married with like my friend's son or something.
Yeah.
That's the world that we live in. Even if mom and dad say, we love the gays are great, let's do gay all the time. If you want to be gay, you could be gay. We still live in a world where it is not assumed. It is assumed the opposite. It is assumed that if you're a girl, you're going to get married. You want the princess wedding. It's assumed that if you're a guy, you're into these things. Everything in our world is situated to that.
Yeah.
And even if you're in an environment where your mom says, either way, I love you, you always know that, you're in a household where you're probably the product of two straight parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if the straight parents say, we love the gays and we love you if you are, you still realize I'm different than them at the core level in my own home, where these should be the people I most identify with in the world. I am different than even my parents. That's a really interesting thing to consider. And I think the fear for people is coming out and being like shipped out of that, but also coming out and saying specifically, I am different than the rest of you in this house.
Yeah.
That's hard. That's hard.
Mike, that is a huge pill that you just shoved into my mouth and are making me swallow, but it is such an important one. And I mean, as much as Tina's favorite show in the world is RuPaul's Drag Race, it's on probably 7 hours a day in the house.
There's also
right?
700 seasons of it now.
Exactly. Yes. And I've now seen most of them just by a piecemeal. And so it's a great show. It's very fun. But still, like, just because that's on doesn't mean X. Just because our gay friend came over doesn't mean X. Just because we have a pride flag that hangs out front of our house doesn't mean that is what you just said is so powerful. And again, I never thought of it that way. That who knows if this little boy that we're raising, how he's going to identify. That's huge. And I really appreciate you sharing a little bit of what it was like and some of those fears when you were growing up, because, you know, it's easy to assume that everybody just grew up like you. Right. Like, you don't, if you have knowledge, you have a life experience, and that just is that's all you know.
Right.
This is where people get stuck today because they're more interested in being right than what is right. And so a lot of that comes down to, and what I've been trying to ask myself a lot since I left my hometown is, okay, what you just described, for example, Mike, is so different than anything I've ever had to deal with. But rather than recoiling and being like, well, that can't be true, well, that's not a thing, right? I never saw that, right? Instead, it's like, well, what if that is true? If that is true, what else is true? Going to some good improv stuff, right? And it's a good comedy rule, but it also applies to people's lives and their lived experiences. I just really appreciate that you being vulnerable for us in that moment.
Thank you. It's interesting too, because I was interviewed for a show, and this happened more than once. I was interviewed on stage actually in a panel once, and I was like the chosen dignitary of the alphabet group of the LGBTQ plus community. And they asked, and it was about like representation or something like that. And the person asked me about being a Black trans woman. Like, what would that be like? And I was like, I have no idea. Like,
asked you what it would be like?
Yeah. Like trying to say like, as not like, what is the personal struggle, but like, what did it mean for representation and in that community? How did they feel? And I was like, I don't know, because like I have similar blinders that anyone else has to that community because I'm not one. And so there's this assumption even of like, well, if you're LGBTQ plus any of those things, then you all have the same experience. You've all lived the same experience. You all have shared things. And it's like, no, there's a big range even in that community of what people have gone through and what they've seen in that. It really does. I mean, this is such a topic I hear a lot from I have a friend who worked in the university world and student life, and she was the very first person I ever heard speaking about intersectionality.
Mm.
And it really, when you hear somebody talk about talk about it, you're like, of course, like you can be a white man who grew up poor, who did this. You could be a black woman who grew up rich, and so you have this. And I think that we forget that sometimes when we're thinking about these experiences of like, there's my husband, another white gay man, his experience being gay was totally different than mine, and it's so easy to forget that because we've watched one movie or like donated to the Trevor Project that we understand everyone in that community. And I think when you realize that there's more to us than, the characters on Will and Grace, I think it maybe opens up your ability to understand that about everybody, like including you. Like we start to see like, oh, there's a lot of layers here, and it's just so easy to not see them. It's difficult to see them. It's a lot of work to see them,
Sure. Yeah. Because not seeing them is easier.
Right. And it's what we're wired to do. It's such a painful truth of our human experience is that we're not supposed to be a global community. We're not supposed part of the reason that storytelling, I think, exists, that verbal communication exists, is because we were trying to decide who's in and who's out, and the people who could use stories, oration to convince other people of things got included. Mm-hmm. And that inherently implies that as a human species, we are wired to create others. And it's, I think, one of our big challenges today is that we're fighting in some level biology that served us once upon a time that doesn't serve us anymore,
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And so much of it comes back to psychology and who makes me feel safe. But where did you learn what safety is?
Right.
Right. Who taught you what safe meant? And yeah, for sure. 100%. You mentioned your husband, Phil, and you and Phil have this beautiful relationship. We're out here chin with the wine left and right, and having a really beautiful time. I believe, and Phil's a restaurateur, correct? You were both restaurateurs?
He's a chef.
He's a chef. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Great. Well, I'm glad somebody fed Phil. And it was a bad joke. I'm sorry about that.
I get it.
We'll edit that out. No, we won't.
We're dads. We're allowed to make bad jokes now, right? It's the greatest freedom.
Exactly. So what was it that enabled you, and I know that this was obviously years of experience, life, and et cetera, is part of the answer to this. But at the end of the day, finding someone who we love deeply still means we allow ourselves to be seen by them. And a lot of what you were talking about in your fears is like, I don't want to be seen by some of these individuals because that means could mean X, Y, or Z. And so what was it letting someone in like that, like a Phil, where you like, I'm going to let this person see me for all this hot messery we got going on down below?
Ooh, I think that's still, I mean, we've been together for almost 17 years now. And I think it still happens every day, or happens all the time, partly because I think that we are constantly learning more about ourselves. Mm-hmm. There's a psychologist who wrote like a very early book on the inner child, inner adult, called Inner Bonding, and Margaret Paul is the author of that. And that the inner child, inner adult thing is all about like recognizing that probably at some point our inner child was created to keep us safe, to keep us protected. And that in every instance, we have two choices only. We have the choice to protect ourselves, which typically is coming from that inner child. Your present adult is trying to protect the inner child from getting hurt in some way, or you have the opportunity to learn and explore something. And I think that in intimate relationships, that is constantly the question we're being asked is, am I doing something here to learn about myself and learn about us? Or am I doing something here to protect myself? And do I need to protect myself? Is that valuable anymore? It goes back to what you were just saying about the psychology of How did you learn to do that to protect yourself? Because we all have it. Like our proclivities, our addictions, are the way we numb ourselves, whatever the case. I would argue that anyone who says like, oh, people are addicted to their cell phones because of the cell phones, that is wrong. You're addicted to your cell phones because we're numbing something that we're trying to protect ourselves from, whatever that is. And I think that in a personal relationship, like in my marriage, it is evolving all the time. And for me, having a child like a year ago, really shifted my identity in so many ways that I did have to ask questions where it was like, I never had to think about this before of why do I do this? It wasn't a problem. It didn't bother me. And so, and I'm like the primary stay-at-home person during the week. Because of COVID, I don't have to travel as much to speak. And I've been moving my business more to doing private coaching and bringing people here to LA to work with them anyway. And so that brought up a bunch of things. And it always, I think in that close personal relationship, like a marriage, I think it always brings up the stuff of like, oh, shoot, here's this whole thing I never talked about or dealt with because I didn't need to. And then having a baby, being in a close personal relationship, I think can really push you up against that. And so I would say for 17 years, we've been every moment deciding, am I protecting myself or am I learning here, and making the wrong choice a whole bunch of times.
Yeah,
and for whatever reason, we just kept, waypoint finding each other again. We had like a Ross and Rachel breakup in the middle, where we just were not understanding each other.
Yeah.
And it is interesting. My therapist, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about something and I was talking about being annoyed of some really stupid, ridiculous thing and questioning like, why am I so upset about this really simple thing, And she had said, oh, it's really interesting that in a way you want to be seen, you want to be acknowledged and seen by Phil in this way. And yet in this other way where he sees you and says something, you don't want to be seen. And I was like, I think that probably is the case for a lot of relationships like that,
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And I think a lot of it gets spiked in parenting.
Oh yeah.
For sure. All of it's coming out. All of it's coming out. And, I love the way that you put it, because I relate it to something that I've often thought and even tell Tina, where it is way easier for me to love her than it is some days to let her love me.
Oh yeah.
And that, it's just like, just because whatever's going on in my head and whatever I'm bringing to the table or not bringing to the table, or things that I perceive as failures or as like, oh, I'm a bad partner, like things that they don't even notice. And so, it's crazy.
And like the little times where it's like, where in this instance, maybe it's broad in general with everyone, maybe it's this specific instance with one specific person, but like we learn also sometimes to put other people's feelings ahead of our own as a way to earn love even, which is that's such an interesting thing to explore as well. And so it's like, oh yeah, it's so much easier sometimes. I'm not saying this is what happened for you there, but it's so much easier to love and give than it is to get the love, because we think that I have to do that to earn the love. So if all of a sudden you're doing it to me, I'm not earning love right now, even though you're giving it to me. And it's like, that is fundamentally like the weirdest messed up thing, but that happens to me a lot, that specific thing that you mentioned.
Yeah, for sure. And the check's in the mail for that counseling session.
I basically go to therapy and then the next week I use it on someone else.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what we're all doing out here, right?
I call myself a pharmacist. I pass out the drugs. I don't take them. No, you should do this. I've literally made money teaching other people what I need to hear for 15 years.
I think so. I always say this with people when I'm working with folks and they're like, oh, I did this like ideal customer avatar activity, and my ideal customer is a woman named Claire who lives in the suburb and has a charcuterie business and a Honda Odyssey. And it's like, no, your ideal customer is you a couple of years ago. That's who I think we're speaking to. That's who I think, like, you look at Leading Imperfectly, your book there, and it's like that book is for you at some point in the past. And that's why it's relevant, and that's why it's rich, and that's why it has so much meaning, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm here for that sauce. Uh, so you and I are both new parents. The wonderful and stunning Viviana is a year old, and we're at 8 months, so we're not that far behind from from you all. And in becoming parents, one thing that was always told to me, and I'm sure to you also, is that everything changes, right? And so, but here's the thing: is that I had no concept of what everything meant. I was like, yeah, some things are going to change, but Mike, literally everything has changed.
Yeah.
And it's crazy, right? But I don't, who knows how to wrap your head around that until it actually happens to you. I don't know if there's any more prep work I could have done, but still, it has rocked my world in some really, really beautiful, incredible ways. And in some other ways where I'm like, yo, bro, the mirror is kind of scary. Right. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering how, and now that you're a year in, is it what you thought it would be? Is it how are you doing? How does it feel? What's going on with Viviana and how it racks your brain? How that little one racks your brain?
What's interesting is people say like it, the whole like, oh, it changes everything. And the things that I thought it would change were all of the like cute things and like, oh, you're not going to get any sleep and like you're going to put your baby first. And it, all of those things all of that was like exactly as expected. So this is all very like deep. Like this is like the diner where people look at the table and they're like, why is that guy crying over there with that other dude the whole time? And that's me today. So, and I say this as earlier in the show, I talked about like putting things out there that that you can say safely because maybe someone will listen and hear it. So this is my interest in doing this. I really suffered in the beginning. I had like really serious postpartum depression, which men get as well. Mm-hmm. Like really, really seriously. And we had Viviana was a preemie. So like when we brought her home, she was still a month before her actual due date. So she came home with us before like, whatever that was, 35 weeks or something. She was 4.5 pounds. And so like she really, really for a while, like 3 or 4 months, like didn't even acknowledge that I existed. And it was winter. I mean, it's winter in LA, but it's still winter. It still gets gloomy.
Sure.
You can't go on walks in the sun. It was COVID. So I didn't even feel safe, like taking her to Target or walking around. There was nowhere to go. And I just was I had a really hard time with it at the beginning, and I did not expect that at all. And I did not expect the amount of guilt that sometimes I still feel I don't care how many times somebody says like, oh my God, self-care is so important as a parent. Like you really have to take care of you. It is really hard for me personally. And I think a lot of people to not feel like a total trash person, doing any of those things, taking care of any of the things you need to take care of for yourself, putting on your own oxygen mask first. I know it makes sense, but it is really freaking hard to do. And when you do
analogy. I'm over it.
Spend your whole time feeling guilty. And so I didn't expect any of that. Like that I didn't read, that I didn't find in an Instagram quote, that I didn't listen to on a podcast. None of that was I ready for. And that all shocked me a lot of like, whoa, you really feel. And then there was the little things like yesterday, we went for her year wellness check where they do all of the 12-month vaccines. Get ready, by the way. Because the 12 months, there's like 7 vaccines they give them.
Oh, wow. Okay. Buckle
7
up.
shots.
Yeah. Oh.
And you have to hold her down. I had to hold her down with her hands, and she's staring at me like E2 Brute. Like she is just like you. And then she did this cry that I'd never heard before. She was like doing that, and I'm sobbing. My tears are dripping on her as I'm holding her arms, and this nurse is jabbing her with the vaccines. And then afterwards, she's crying. The nurse leaves because she's like, Viviana's triggered by the nurse at this point. She leaves. I'm standing in there with this like naked baby, and I'm just holding her and I'm sobbing probably for 12 minutes.
Oh God.
Sobbing because it was like, and then she was fine in 5 minutes. Yeah. I will be talking about this for 22 years in therapy. Nobody told me about that either. Okay. So I read the wrong books, I think.
Yeah. Where are those books at?
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. If I could have paid Phil to like be like, you go to the doctor this time around. And then last night she had a little bit of a fever, which
Yeah.
you get from the vaccine sometimes. So then I was like, oh, now she has a fever and it's my fault. And I did this and I held her down and she's going to remember this forever. And someday at her college graduation, when she's like graduating, she'll be like, I've never forgiven you. I never want to speak to you again because you held me down that time. And I know it's unrealistic, but that
Yeah.
is what goes through my head.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Because yeah, it's incomprehensible that you're just like gonna forget this. Even if I can't think back to what I was thinking at 9 months, but like it still doesn't. It's still while I'm holding my 8-month-old baby, I'm like, well, here it starts right now. Let's should I sign up for sign the kid up for therapy next year? Like what? Like when do we start all this?
Right. Is there a
Yeah.
version that's not talk therapy where the kid just does something? And there is
Right.
actually, I'm sure there's some kind of therapy for babies.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, someone's monetized everything out here. And if it isn't, you and I have a business plan to talk about after this call. But but yeah, it's fascinating the way it just racks your brain. And especially, I mean, for you as someone as someone who is playing the role of like you said, predominantly stay at home dad. I mean, you're in the thick of it. You're in the throes of it, even more so. And yeah, I mean, with Tina and I were traveling a lot, and Rome came down. I was telling you right before we got on that Rome came down with a rash, and I'm talking to Tina in South Carolina and FaceTiming her and being like, look at this rash on his legs or whatnot. And she's like, why does it always happen whenever only one of us is there? He never gets sick when both of us are there and we can both take the burden. And now I'm out here in South Carolina being a shitty parent, talking to an audience of women who didn't give a shit about me, and you know what I mean? Like, you just write these stories, and I write the same stories on the nights where he just has terrible nights of sleep where I'm gone, and I'm like, okay, good. Now your whole day tomorrow is screwed, and it's because I wasn't there. And you just write. The storytelling in parenting is fascinating, and it's predominantly us telling stories to ourselves. And it is most of them are dark, and it's just so fascinating to do something that is on a daily basis punching you in your insecurities.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
I mean, do you find that I thought if you had asked me like a year ago in August before she was born, how are you? I would have been like, pretty stable. I know myself pretty well. I understand my stuff. I think I'm really clear on it. I know I got this shadow side that I'm working on, very like Jungian, by the way. Carl Jung is a therapist. And I was like, my shadow side, I'm in touch with my animus. I know it all. And then the person I am today, I would be like, that freaking idiot from a year ago at 40 years old. I'm 41 right now. At 40 years old, I would have said like, I'm not perfect, but I know myself. Today, I'd be like, I don't know anything about myself. I don't know who I am. I know nothing. Do you feel that way with all of this? Like the having a child really shoved me into being like, oh, you think you know you? You have no idea. It's like the intro of a reality show.
Yeah, right. Big Brother 2.0 or something.
Yeah.
Yes, I definitely have felt that. And I have also, one thing that I'm trying to do is that there are stories that I would write about myself, like, oh, James, you're so selfish about time. Like time is the most important thing. That's one of the reasons why Hamilton punched me in the face, right? It's this concept of time, and we're running out of time, and right, and like I moved away from my parents, and now, they're 74, and I'm like, all right, well, they'll probably live to 88, and I'll see them 3 times a year, so that means I'm only going to see my parents 30 more times in their life, or you know what I mean? Like it's just like just time. And so, and I was like, James, you're so selfish about time that you're not going to be a very good parent because this kid's not going to go down as quickly as you would like them to. And you got a phone call, or this is going to happen. And they're going to have to, he's going to have to come home from daycare, and your day is going to change, and that's going to bother you. So I knew those things going into it. And now there's part of me that wonders if I'm not giving myself grace. And instead I'm just like, see, I told you, this is what I told you before. Right. Like, and so there's a lot of times where I think I just parenting has been me hanging out at the intersection of self-awareness and lost,
Yeah.
and not realizing that those two roads connected.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, what a great, like that, like even just like the subtitle of a book. Someday we got to like co-write a book together, and that's got to be the subtitle, the intersection of self-awareness and loss. And there's just like a sign of like two lost dads standing at a corner with a diner in the background.
Well, of course, yeah, because branding's everything.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing how it really does say, you think you knew yourself.
Yeah.
You didn't, in some really great ways. You're like, wow, I didn't know I had the capacity to not be such a selfish prick all the time. That's been lovely. And wow, I can go outside and have, like, before we started recording, I had a jacket on, and I got here and I was like, well, there's milk all over it. This was the milk and jizz comment from earlier, by the way. If you're still sticking around, payoff is here. Because it was like covered in like white stuff. And I was like, well, it's one or the other. And so like, I realized like, oh, I can go outside and like, I go out in like my little short dad shorts and who cares? And those things have been really interesting and lovely. And like, I won't die if my hair doesn't look perfect when I go outside. And like, who cares if there's baby spit up on my shirt when I go to the grocery store? That's been lovely, that part. And then there's that whole other part that you're talking about. That's like, I don't need this wall to come. I was fine with that wall. I built that wall. It's a beautiful wall. Why do we have to smash it and then look at all the bricks and try to figure out who we are? I was good without doing that work.
Yep. So speaking of work, Mike, they call this a transition in the business. You, for work, you are a storytelling coach. Everything that you do revolves around story. You help companies tell their story, find their story. You help individuals find their stories, learn how to tell them. Right? You're a TEDx coach. You got a lot of things. You yourself are a speaker where you tell your stories. And so this has been an interesting thing for me, is that I have yet to tell any stories about fatherhood, being a parent on stage. Because I think it's all still a little too new. It's too fresh. It's also probably part of like the perfectionist in me, or it's like, well, I don't have the nice little package for it yet, so don't say it yet, James. Right. And so like, you don't have to set up punch. But I will be fascinated to see the way that maybe, and this is my question to you, is has it already started to impact the business side of what you do? Have you started telling the stories around parenting or becoming a parent? And if not, I'm wondering, do you think you will? And what do you think that looks like?
In three really specific ways it already has. One is that I've recognized, let's talk about privilege. I've recognized that as a man, I get a ton of credit for being a dad and doing the things I do that women don't. So if I'm on stage or if I'm on social and I post about a baby, I don't have to worry for 1 second about somebody seeing that and thinking he's not committed. He's not really ready. He's leaving a baby and he's coming to work. I don't ever have to think about that. And in fact, I get so many brownie points for like, even just going to the grocery store as like a dad. And it's like, oh, like some lady chased me out to the car this week when I went to Costco to like take the cart back for me because I had Viviana in it and I was taking her out and I was going to push the cart back. She like ran across the thing to get it, to take it for me. People don't do that for moms enough. No, we just don't. And so that's one thing, is I realize that as a business thing, my child is a great investment. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that like I realize that as like a largely personal brand, and that like people don't work with me unless they like me. That's just I'm not like a business where they're gonna get the goods. They don't work with me unless they like me. Yeah. That being a dad is like a really interesting part of that. So that's one thing. Two is that it's shifted a little bit the work I'm interested in doing. Like I'm a little less interested in the like, how do we help you sell more of your coaching programs? And what I'm a lot more interested in is, how do we help you figure out who the hell you are and how to give voice to that? Because like, I don't think that I make fun of we're working on like a new website, and when I was working with the copy person, they wrote the line, find your voice. And I was like, nope, very specifically, I don't believe in that. We don't need to find our voice. We don't need to go on a quest. We don't need to go on a journey to see where it is. We didn't leave it in a drawer or anything like that. What we need to do is reveal the thing that we know is burning inside of us, and we need to get rid of all the stuff. So it's changing the work I'm interested in doing, because it's more that work, which is pushing me more and more to working with individuals than it is working with companies. And then the third thing is that I did my first in-person keynote a month ago, whenever that was, in North Carolina, for like a big audience and a big, beautiful theater. It was so cool. And I wrote a new ending to it. And so in my intro, it said that I was a new dad. I referenced being a dad a couple times. And then at the end, I said, I haven't really told you my story. I've been talking about this. I haven't shared my story. And I talked about like how a year ago, this baby, blah, blah, blah. So why am I here? I showed a little picture of her holding my little finger in the NICU with her tiny little 2.5-pound finger. And I was like, why am I here? Like, why, I have to ask myself that, like, why did I get here? Why did I travel this way? Why am I here with you instead of with her? And then I show like a beautiful picture of her cute little face today. And I realize that the through line for me in this work is that I want my child to grow up in a world full of other people who realize that their experiences, their perspective, their stories really matter, and that being able to share those really, really matters. And this was this new ending I wrote. I cried, they cried. Ooh. It was like this whole thing.
I'm welling up.
Yeah. And so then that's like kind of the new ending, because it's the truth of like, why do I think this matters so much? I think it matters. Like a year and a half ago, it was like, oh, whatever. Like, you want to sell more jeans to teenagers? I know what you need to say.
Yeah.
And I just really don't give a damn about that anymore. What I really care about is like, what is the truth that you are here to reveal?
Yeah.
And let's uncover that, because that's the world I want my child to grow up in, not one where someone figured out how to use narrative to sell a pair of skinny jeans.
Mm-hmm. We're also, as parents, experiencing all these raw emotions, and we're out here being like, you need to feel these raw emotions too, you bunch of pricks.
I'm going to make you cry.
Bunch of empty nester CEOs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for making me well up, dude. That was really cool. But no, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And
thanks.
And I love the way that you're already bringing it in, right? And that's what we do. We take our experiences and make them into stories that connect with others. And that's powerful. I went through a divorce 5-6 years ago now, and I was telling my buddy who was also going through divorces, who was also a speaker, and I was like, in like 3 years, this is gonna be such a good story.
Yeah.
Like this sucks, and this is hard, and this is really rough right now, but like this is gonna be this is one of those crucible moments.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of how I feel about parenting, is that I'm trying to figure out, when does it come up? How does it come up? And so I really appreciate the way that you do it. That was brilliant.
For me, it's really funny too. There's something cathartic for me in like, and maybe like diabolical and not healthy in some way, but there's something cathartic for me in like very quickly after something happens, like trying to find the meaning in it so I can like do something with it. And in a lot of ways it's good. In some ways I imagine that's probably bad. Cause I struggle to like just sit with something and let myself marinate in it. I'm constantly like, what is the meaning of this? Let me package it and see what it is. But I write a lot, and for me, it almost feels to like extend my woo-woo-ness so far.
Let's go.
It feels almost channeled in a way that there's like my best friend of haven't talked about this before on anything. My best friend of like 25 years that I met in college recently passed away. And like surprisingly, and I remember I was driving back from her apartment here in LA. I'm the only one that was in LA of her family or anything. So I was the one that went and got the pets and did everything.
Yeah.
I remember feeling so like overwhelmed by how I felt when I was there and not knowing and it's okay. You don't have to know what you're going to say in those moments. And I'm driving back from her place to our house, and it almost felt like a cat with a hairball that I had to pull over on the freeway. I like pulled over, rush hour. You don't do that in LA. I pulled over on the freeway, got off the off ramp, and I opened my phone and I just started writing and writing and writing. And it really clearly spoke to how I was feeling. It really clearly spoke to what I thought was useful, meaningful to myself, to other people about it. And I don't know where it came from. I don't know, because I wasn't thinking of it and like, I should pull over and write this. It was like this impulse of change. And I do that so often, including with this story that I closed with at that conference about Viviana, of like, it hits me and it's almost like a channeled thing. And I think a lot of people have this. We just tend to ignore it. We tend to say, "Ooh, this doesn't have value here." And so I don't think I have like any gift in like being able to more quickly categorize what's happened to me and turning it into a story to use. It's like somehow something says, here it is, go do something with this, or else, you're wasting life that you've lived, that you could be sharing to help yourself and help other people,
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, for sure. I think it's a muscle that you have trained.
Sure.
And like, it's, like a comedian's he's going to grab the napkin and write the joke on the napkin really quick.
Yeah.
But it is one that you have trained for absolutely beautiful reasons, because I agree with you, right? It's like, hey, there's no way that impulsive, there's no way I'm the only one who's going through this.
Yeah.
There's no way that's the only thing that this is just a me thing right now. Somebody else has been here. Somebody else is going through it. Somebody else needs to hear this. Is a really beautiful notion. That's what I teach. That's a lot of what Leading Imperfectly is about, right? It's like, you got to lead through those slips, struggles, and stories, not just your strengths and your successes. And it's like, you've got to bring people in. The power to help people feel seen and heard is outrageous. And that is something that you are exceptional at. It's something that other speakers need to be exceptional at. Before teaching, you got to make someone feel seen and heard, because otherwise, why are they going to stay focused on you, right? And so it's a true gift that you have, brother. And thank you for sharing that. I am deeply sorry for your loss. That sounds really hard, and I appreciate you sharing it with us.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah. It's been so cool hanging out with you, brother. We took him on a roller coaster here,
we did.
From milk and jizz to tears. I guess that'll be the title of our second book. Really. That'll be our second book. We gotta get the writing here. But it has been so dope getting to hang out with you in the diner, brother. As I mentioned in your intro, you've been someone who I've admired, have watched, right? You kind of always have, I don't know if you're like this, but you kind of have those other speaker friends. You're like, let me see what this dude's website looks like. Let me see what this dude's promo video. What's going on with this guy? What's he posting here? Right. And you're just someone who I've always really appreciated and respected the way that you ran your business and the way that you carry your life. And it is a goal of mine to drink wine with you on a beautiful balcony somewhere. So we got to make that happen.
Can't wait. I feel the same when we met recently for the first time in person. And I said, like years ago, I have a screenshot in my phone of some image you posted, and it was like this beautiful felt bag with like a brown leather strip or something of it. And I just remember being like, this guy is so freaking cool. Like, he's so cool. He's got this cool logo. He's got this perfect book. It has like everything people need to know. And I freaking love him, and I hate him, and I want to know him. And so for me, this is just like the absolute biggest honor that you gave me some of your attention and time today. So thank you.
Yes, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you for coming in the diner. Y'all, that was my boy, Mike Ganino. You can find him all over social media at Mike Ganino, MikeGanino.com. When I say he's working magic with individuals that are trying to find ways to tell their stories and hone their stories, I am not understating that. He's an exceptional man, as you could tell, a great storyteller himself. So he talks about, he lives what he talks, and a friend that I'm really proud to say that our friendship is growing. And I hope you all had a great time. I had a great time. I learned a lot. And until next time, when we kick it in the diner again, my friends, keep punching small talk in the face by asking better questions. You all take care.